Hey everyone, I'm Bill. Oh, sorry. So I'm a PhD student in the IC department in Viterbi, and this is a joint work with my collaborators on designing policies for allocating housing to persons experiencing homelessness. So as you may or may not know, there's a severe homelessness crisis right now in LA, where there's about over 69,000 people experiencing homelessness as of the latest counts. But the number of resources, roughly speaking, is only about 28,000. So basically, there's only about a third of the resources to the number of people who need them. Now, roughly speaking, on a very high level, what happens right now is people come into the system and they take this survey, right? And based on this survey, depending on the responses they get, they accumulate certain points, and we calculate a vulnerability score. So for example, if you were sleeping in shelter before, right, maybe you get +1, something like that. Now, what happens on a very high level is you get this vulnerability score and you get recommendations. So the higher the score, the more vulnerable you are. And if you look at some of these resources, right, permanent supportive housing, PSH, is the most supportive resource you could get. Now, basically what we're saying here is the more vulnerable you are, you should get somewhat, in some sense, a better resource. But right now, this kind of like scoring mechanism is a little flawed in some sense. One, the weights that you calculate, they're not really tuned to any historical data. On the other hand, from like an overall system level perspective, it may not be the case that the people who are the most vulnerable necessarily do the best or need the most supportive resource. And then there's also issues of fairness. So basically, if you look at what I highlighted in that red box from a report from a few years ago, what people notice is for people who receive that PSH I just mentioned, for individuals who are Black, what you will notice is that the rate of returns to homelessness, which means you get the resource, and I check sometime in the future, do I show up homeless again? It's almost double. So the question is, can we design a policy for allocating housing to maximize some system outcomes subject to budget constraints and fairness constraints? So basically, skipping over all the math, you have some people come in. What we really want to do is, okay, can we assign you to these different queues? And then once the resource comes in, which you'll get the resource in the queue that you're assigned. And what we're able to do is, if you look at some of those words on the bottom, basically we assign you to the queue that has the best expected outcome that you would receive from getting the resource, minus some opportunity costs, and also some fairness modifiers. Happy to talk about that afterwards. Not really much time to talk about that. So in the remaining time, I will just try to give you some results that we have. So we have this data from LASA, and we take all the individuals who were assessed from 2015 to 2019, and we try to split into two halves. In the first half, we try to, train this like methodology I briefly mentioned before. And then in the test data from 2017 to 2019, we try to see, okay, how well does the policy we have perform? Skipping over some of the details, I just want to show you the main results and takeaways here. So basically, that historical policy is what the percentage of like positive outcomes that we see in the data. So the positive outcome basically means, okay, we don't see that you return to homelessness in the future once I gave you a certain resource. Now, if you look at the other ones below, basically there are some like proposed methodologies that we have. So the base methodology is we don't do any like modifiers for fairness, but then in the two below, what we basically say, okay, if what the stakeholders really care about is you're a minority group, we want to make sure that you either receive resources more than say white individuals, or you have outcomes better than them. So what I'm showing you is the overall takeaways. And basically what you can see is in everything that we propose, we're able to achieve some sort of improvement above the historical, but also these fairness policies don't do too much worse than the base policy. And I just want to show you what exactly that means in terms of the fairness. So basically, I'm just showing you for different racial groups, what's the likelihood they get assigned a certain resource. So that blue bar is the majority group for white individuals, whereas every other racial group we consider as a minority group. And what you're able to see is in the policy where we explicitly tell the algorithm, okay, we want minority groups to receive more resources, we'll see those bars higher. And then finally, for outcome fairness, basically how well do each of these racial groups do? Again, you see the racial minority groups able to have bars higher than the blue bar. So, and then time's up. So yeah, thank you.